Good Thursday morning, and thanks for joining us on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Alicia Lewis. Just in this morning, Nakima Levy-Armstrong, a local civil rights attorney and activist, has been arrested connected to a protest inside of a St. Paul church. Now, according to Attorney General Pam Bondi, Armstrong was arrested for playing a key role in organizing the, quote, coordinated attack on City's church in St. Paul, end quote. Now, that demonstration was against one of the church's pastors, David Easterwood, who is allegedly a leader in a local ICE office. Just in this morning, Immigration and Customs Enforcement Commander Greg Bavino speaking out again about what he is calling resistance against ICE on the streets of Minneapolis.
This emboldened rhetoric vilifies law enforcement and creates very unsafe situations for law enforcement and occludes from the mission of taking these bad people, as Mr. Marcos Charles said, off the streets.
Bavino hurling accusations of federal law enforcement being targeted in the Twin Cities and local law enforcement not helping stop it. He also repeated claims that people ICE has arrested were let out of custody by county officials. The Department of Corrections has said that state law requires them to turn over any arrestee that is in the country illegally to ICE, and that ICE is the one releasing them back into the community. Well, just in this morning, a 28-year-old man has been arrested connected to a missing 7-year-old girl from Zimmerman that triggered an Amber Alert overnight. That girl was found in Albert Lea about 10 hours after she was last seen getting off the school bus. Right now, the connection between the girl and the man arrested is not clear. We'll update you when we learn anything new. This morning, Arctic air is moving into Minnesota, forcing a KARE 11 weather impact alert for tonight, and that's going to last through the weekend. And as you heard John say, wind chills are going to get as low as negative 51 degrees, depending on where you live. That's cold. We're going to get a check from our weather team in just a little bit for a full look at that weekend forecast. But when this kind of cold falls on Minnesota, you need to prepare yourself. Our Audrey Russo's in Minneapolis with some tips.
Yeah, and in this particular business, Alicia, negative 40 wind chills can spell disaster. Everything we use runs on a battery. Our microphones, the equipment that we use to transmit our live signal back, this light, which has been flashing on and off constantly. And so the cold air can sap those batteries. It can sap any battery, really. So now is the time to make sure you're protecting your devices from the cold. Now, obviously, the number one device almost all of us have, a cell phone. Tech experts say that most phones are designed to operate between 32 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Anything less and they start to lose their optimal function. Now, charging your phone before you head out the door can help, but too much exposure to the cold air can make your screen sluggish. And you also want to pay attention to your car's battery. Get it tested, make sure you have some jumper cables on hand, and if you have a security camera on your house that uses a battery rather than a wired power source, be prepared to have some backup batteries on hand or be prepared to recharge. Now, it is all about limiting exposure to the air for not only your devices, but for you, your family, your pets. Now, only a handful of schools have made the decision to cancel either today or tomorrow. You can keep a closer eye, though, on some of those cancellations by going to kare11.com/closings. Back to you.
Audrey, thank you. New video this morning of hundreds of U of M students protesting ICE outside of the Graduate Hotel. And that's where they say agents are staying. Police dispersed the crowd just before midnight. And this all comes hours before Vice President J.D. Vance is set to touch down in Minneapolis to meet with federal agents. His visit happening just one day before a statewide ICE out of Minnesota protests. Megan McPherson joins us with more.
This morning, dozens of student groups and labor unions at the University of Minnesota are set to hold a press conference expected to announce their participation in a strike that's planned for tomorrow. Organizers are calling it ICE Out of Minnesota Day, urging people across the state to stop work, skip school, and avoid shopping as federal immigration operations continue across the Twin Cities. The Hmong community also joining this push. Vendors from Hmong Village, the owners of Ha Tien Supermarket, and St. Paul City Councilmember Nelsie Yang will hold their own press conference. Organizers say business owners, community leaders, and residents are pushing back. Teachers also speaking out in Columbia Heights, where they say 4 students in the district have been detained by ICE in just the past few weeks. The most recent happening Tuesday afternoon as 5-year-old Liam Ramos and his father were detained by ICE while driving home from preschool.
He's a bright young student, and he's so kind and loving, and his classmates miss him. And all I want is for him to be safe and back here.
Let the city let the city deal with it. The city knows what to do with it. Let Child Protection Services take care of them while the parents battle the legal battle.
The family's attorney says Liam and his father are likely being held at a detention facility in Texas. He adds the family has been following the law while seeking asylum and is now working to bring Liam back home to Columbia Heights so he can reunite with relatives and return to school.
Well, 2 men accused of assaulting a federal agent during an arrest are awaiting trial this morning. The struggle leading to the second ICE-related shooting in Minneapolis just last week. Now, that officer shot one of the men in the leg, which the federal government says was in self-defense.
They used a shovel or a broom to smash his face in. And so, yes, that agent had to use self-defense and take up his weapon to protect his own life.
The 2 men charged, Alfredo Alhorna and Julio Sosa Solis, are in the country illegally, but ICE agents actually thought they were chasing someone else as they tried to stop Alhorna. He did lead them on a 20-minute high-speed chase that ended up at Sosa Solis' house. The ICE officer says he fired after the 2 men were hitting him with a broom and a shovel, but the defense attorney says that version does not fit the evidence.
Version 2, which I think is consistent with the broader evidence, is that the victims of the shooting were about 10 feet away, going away from the officer at the time he fired his gun. Under that scenario, this was clearly an unjustified and unreasonable use of force. But again, the facts are in dispute.
And the men will be held in ICE custody while awaiting trial, so there is a chance they get deported before the trial occurs. This morning, many St. Paul Public School students are staying home as classes move online over ICE enforcement concerns. The district tells us only 80% of students will be coming back in person, while nearly a fifth of the district opted for their emergency remote learning option.
Our priority is to make sure families have the option that they need, and we've been hearing from families that feeling safe is really important, and moving around the city doesn't feel safe for some families right now.
And right now, nearly 6,000 iPads are being distributed to students for remote learning. District officials say students in grades 6 through 12 will keep their current teachers, while K through 5 are a case-by-case basis. This morning, a Minnesota-based nonprofit helping people who escaped persecution and torture in other countries say that several of their clients were recently arrested by ICE and then flown to Texas. The Center for Victims of Torture says that 4 people recently arrested are in the U.S. legally with pending asylum cases, work permits, and no criminal records. Nelson says one of the center's clients called her social worker from the back of an ICE van, panicked and begging for help. She says the social worker could hear the ICE agents laughing in the background as the woman asked them why she was being detained.
One of them was taken as she arrived for work. She was tackled in the snow in front of her coworkers. It was very humiliating. They didn't even give her the chance to go willingly. They just tackled her.
And we've reached out to the Department of Homeland Security about this, but we have yet to hear back. This morning, a bill allowing mining near the Boundary Waters is moving on to the U.S. Senate. Yesterday, House Republicans voted to lift a 20-year ban covering nearly 250,000 acres of the Superior National Forest. That ban was put in place by the Biden administration. Supporters of the bill say it would create jobs and strengthen national security. Environmental advocates, however, warn mining runoff would be bad for the ecosystem. Well, just days after threatening allies with tariffs over the refusal to hand over Greenland, President Trump is taking that threat back and saying that he and NATO's Secretary General have a framework of a future deal involving Greenland and security. He says the potential deal would be good for the U.S. and Europe, but hasn't talked to Danish leaders yet. NBC's Alice Barr has details from Washington.
Hi there. President Trump called the framework of a deal for Greenland's future complex and said it would be explained down the line. As 3 sources, including a congressional official, tell NBC News that despite his escalating rhetoric, President Trump arrived at this major economic forum in Switzerland looking for a deal to give the U.S. more control over Greenland's security and in the broader Arctic region. President Trump continuing his foreign focus today in Davos, Switzerland, with the first meeting of the Board of Peace, formed to oversee reconstruction of Gaza. and now expanding to seek an end to other global conflicts.
This board has the chance to be one of the most consequential bodies ever created.
Dozens of world leaders invited to join, including Russian President Vladimir Putin, though some European allies declined over concerns the board could rival the United Nations, all amid that diplomatic dust-up over Greenland, with President Trump now saying he's reached a framework of a future deal with the NATO Secretary General.
We're going to have total access to Greenland. We're going to have all military access that we want.
While also saying he won't use military force to take over Greenland, a Danish territory.
People thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force.
And backing off threatened tariffs against Denmark and 7 other European allies that oppose the U.S. acquiring Greenland. That after Europe hit pause on a long-sought trade deal. President Trump has insisted the U.S. needs Greenland for national security. And now the New York Times, citing 3 senior officials, reports that NATO members discussed the possibility of giving the U.S. sovereignty over small pockets of land to build military bases. The U.S. already has a base in Greenland and broad access to establish more under a Cold War agreement. A NATO spokesperson noted the Secretary General did not propose any compromise to sovereignty during his meeting with President Trump. The NATO Secretary General said the question of whether Greenland would remain a Danish territory did not come up anymore in his conversation with President Trump. A NATO spokesperson added negotiations with the U.S., Greenland, and Denmark would continue to ensure Russia and China never gain a foothold in Greenland. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
Hey, be sure to stick with us. More news and weather coming up after the break.